Hello, everyone. Welcome to Conversations with Sekani, a podcast for people in their 20s who are trying to figure out life and not get lost along the way. Today's guest is Linda Knipe, a retired school counselor and author of Braving Therapy, Rape, Buried Trauma, and the Triumph Journey Over PTSD. After surviving trauma in her 20s, Linda spent years believing strength meant burying painful emotions and simply moving on. Decades later, therapy transformed her understanding of healing, vulnerability, and what it means to truly live an authentic life. Through her work and her book, she now helps others understand trauma, PTSD, and the life changing power of therapy. Linda, welcome to Conversations with Sekani. It's a pleasure to have you on.
Hi, Sekani. It's so nice to be here.
All right. So, Linda, can you take us back to, when you were young, basically? What was it like growing up, and what were the experiences that, shaped who you are today?
Um, I grew up in a rural, small town, in a very large family. I was the second oldest, the oldest girl in a family of 8 children. So s- I always spent a lot of time around people and being helpful, helping um, take care of the younger kids, and then just growing up in a really loving family. I was very lucky to have wonderful parents, and we had a lot of fun growing up. And um, I went away to college, which was the first time I'd really been away from the family, and that presented, challenges being off on my own. I was quite a ways away from home. And then I had some bad stuff happen, and I had not really been well prepared for uh, people entering my life that didn't have my best interests at heart. So I was in a couple of experiences when I was in college. I was on a date that went badly, and
Mm.
when I got off on my own, I actually moved thousands of miles away from my family for work. And I had, within the first few years, I was living on my own in an apartment, and that was broken into, and I was assaulted.
Mm.
Um, so I had some bad things that happened, but I had grown up in a loving family, and I was strong and pretty mentally tough, and just powered on through and didn't seek help from anyone. And so that kind of landed me through my middle years, when I hit my late 30s, into some mental health problems because I was always trying to take care of everything myself.
Wow. I'm so sorry for what happened to you, right? And you did something that I think most young adults usually do when they encounter some traumatic experience, which is, burying their emotions, right? So, first of all, why did you believe that burying your emotions was the strongest thing you could do?
Well, I think I put a lot of stock into um, being smart about things, um, being kind of intellectualizing what was going on and taking care of myself. And there wasn't a lot of room for for me to be able to think clearly and power on with my life if I was going to melt down with the magnitude of emotions that I was feeling. Um, and so instead of really processing all of those emotions, all of those feelings, I just shoved them away and powered on with my life. So I think it has to do with just, you know, functioning and performing as well as you can when you're feeling really upset. And I think a lot of people do that, and you just bury the upset and bury everything that you felt about it and move on. And the problem with that is that you don't process what you felt. You don't think about it and figure it out because you're just so busy moving on with your life and trying to be productive.
All right, Linda, thank you for, sharing your story with us today, right? But talking about still on, unspoken feelings, right? Looking back, how did those unspoken feelings affect your relationship and the way you saw yourself?
Um, I think that the more I realized that things can happen in your life that you don't have control over, the more I tried to control things so that
Mm,
um, I, I could prevent, hopefully, bad things happening. And so that showed up in, trying to control things in relationships. And then I did get married and we had children. And I think I was probably, my boys accused me of being overprotective with them, um,
mm,
because you just have this, you develop this feeling that life is scary and that you have to watch out. And that's a lot what happens in our brain too, um, when we're on alert, we're on high alert. And one of the things, so I will say that, um, as I went on in my adult life, I went back to college. I had gotten my bachelor's degree. I went back for a master's degree in counselor education. And I was triggered really quickly when I started in counseling classes. We were talking about therapy, and the professor mentioned therapy for rape, and that just bringing that up, and it was many years later, um, started triggering memories, which I had buried the feelings, and I think it started pulling up feelings again, but they just I started just feeling all sorts of strange sensations after I left that class that I could not get control of. Um, I was having re-experiencing. I felt like somebody was climbing on me. Um, I felt a lot of fear and confusion. And I finally went back and talked to the professor, and he explained about PTSD, which is um, post-traumatic stress disorder, and said that it's not something that I can power through and control, that I really need to get help to deal with the emotions that I buried, because that was the emotions were all coming back up, but they were all a jumble and they weren't really attached to anything. So that started me on a therapy journey. And many years after I completed therapy, I wrote a book about it, and I've really been able to look back and understand about burying emotions and how that can get in the way of leading the kind of life that you really want to lead, because those buried emotions keep sneaking up on you and getting in the way of a lot of what you're trying to accomplish in your life.
Mm. Wow. All right. So, basically, from your experience, one can tell it is not actually okay to, bury emotions because they would always find a way to, sneak back in form of, feeling insecure or always, like you said, you were overprotective, towards your kids. So it's better to face those emotions and heal from them. So now I want us to, touch on your healing journey, right? So years later, what made you realize that simply moving on wasn't the same as healing?
Well, as I said, I was triggered with PTSD when I was in graduate class, and when you're in the throes of PTSD, you really feel crazy. It's really quite difficult to function normally when I couldn't sleep, I couldn't eat, I kept having um, I kept thinking about being assaulted, I was raped. I was feeling that somebody was there. So it was stuff that I had to deal with. And so I found a therapist, and I wrote about the process of just arguing with myself about whether I needed therapy, and all of the arguments that I had with myself about why I shouldn't bother getting therapy. But ultimately, I needed it. And so I found a therapist, and I started on that journey, which was not easy for me because I was used to burying things, burying my emotions. And so it was difficult for me after so many years of burying emotions to actually understand what I was feeling. It was difficult for me to put emotions into words because I didn't really understand what I was feeling. So that's a lot what we
Mm.
talked about in therapy. Memories would come up, but we would also talk about regular life and what was going on in my life with my husband and children at the time.
All right. So therapy. Therapy is one. I would like to believe that there were other things you engaged in to help healing, right? Aside therapy, was there anything did that helped you heal?
Um, I did a lot of writing. I
Mm.
kept journals, and a
Journaling.
lot because I was I wouldn't be able to go to sleep at night until I just got a lot of the thoughts that were churning around in my head. I couldn't control my thinking anymore. So I had been a person who was pretty well in control, and when the PTSD popped up, I wasn't really able to control anything that was going on in my mind, and so I wouldn't be able to settle down to sleep until I at least got all of the thoughts and feelings that were churning around out and onto paper, and then I would at least be able to go to sleep. I would always wake up in the middle of the night, and I would have to write some more because I would just be ruminating on all sorts of things, about not just about um, when I was raped when I was younger, but about life at the time and about my fears and my confusion about things. There was just so much. So I wrote a lot, and I got out and walked a lot, just so I could kind of think and clear my head. And I was going to therapy at least once a week and sometimes twice a week because um, very quickly I just was it kind of in a real mental health crisis, and my therapist recognized that and had me in to kind of keep an eye on me and keep me going, and to work on it, to work on healing. So it was quite a long journey. There was a lot going on in my life. I was working full time. I was a young mother with 3 little boys, and I was in a marriage, and there was just a lot. And I was in graduate school, so I was feeling pretty overwhelmed. There was a lot to talk about, and a lot of it would harken back to the times when I was assaulted and how that had affected me and affected the way I was functioning and relating to people in my present day life. So the therapy was talk therapy. It was called cognitive behavior therapy. And it was really um, talking about things from an intellectual perspective, but bringing in how recognizing the emotions that I was burying and that were coming out, and how where those had come from and how they were affecting my life, and actually talking about them and putting a story to those emotions and then storing them, properly in my memory. So that's a lot what therapy is. And the therapist was very good. He did not lead me, so I was in control of the therapy and I was in control of what we talked about. But he was very positive about anything that I talked about. It was okay, and he gave me that definite feeling that I was okay and that what I was thinking about was okay, that I didn't need to be ashamed of anything. And I think that shame was making my life really difficult because I was always trying to hide the way I felt about things because I was ashamed of stuff. I was ashamed of things I had done in my life and in the way that I related to people, not because there was anything to be ashamed of, but we tend to do that to ourselves. We are hard on ourselves about what we're doing and how we're performing in our lives, and we beat ourselves up, and then we get ashamed, and then we won't talk about it because we're trying to hide it. So all of that stuff were things that we talked about in therapy, and that finally the therapist started to, because of the way that he responded when I talked about things, which was with an with a posture of, it's called unconditional positive regard, that I was worthy of everything that I felt and of the ways that I had functioned in my life, that there was nothing to be ashamed of. And I finally started to believe it. And when I started to believe that I didn't have anything to be ashamed of, I was finally able to start really talking about how I felt about things, and about um, things that had happened in my life and things that I had done. And I was able to bring those emotions out and look at them and store them where they belonged. So that's the process of therapy, is allowing us to really look at ourselves, and hopefully with a good therapist, they will they will respond to you with unconditional positive regard, that you will have the feeling that you are absolutely okay and that what you're talking about is okay.
Mm.
It was a
Wow.
very nurtured feeling to not, that even when I was judging myself, that my therapist was not judging me.
Mm. Wow. All right. Linda, thank you for sharing that wonderful one with us. Like you mentioned, talk therapy, which is, cognitive behavior therapy, right? It's about, bringing out those feelings and putting them where they belong, right? Another thing you mentioned that helps with healing was journaling. And I feel like people underrate how journaling could actually help. Journaling, most of the guests I have spoken with, they highly recommend journaling, right? However you feel, just write it down somewhere. And it just, it brings this form of relief to you. So I think journaling is one thing that actually really helps when it comes to healing. Right. So thank you very much for sharing, your healing journey with us today. Now I want us to talk about what you're doing today, right? So, how did your own healing influence the way you helped students during your years as a counselor?
Oh, well, I think that as a counselor, just having been through it, and counselors, you know, don't have to share the same experiences to be helpful to their students, but I do think that my experience in therapy and understanding how difficult it is to talk sometimes and how you can beat yourself up and feel shame can keep uh, can keep you silent. And so when I had students who were not able to talk or having a difficult time or being hard on themselves were sitting there, I really understood those feelings and I was able to draw them out to really approach them with unconditional positive regard so that they would start to feel comfortable enough to share some of the things that were going on in their lives. And I was able to help a lot of students and their families understand how about trauma that can affect us in the ways that it affects us. And um, I was able to get some students into therapy. We were in a rural area at the time that did not have therapists, and so I did have a number of students who didn't have transportation to get to any other um, clinical social workers or psychologists, and those students would have to rely on the knowledge and expertise in counseling of the school counselors. And we all quite a bit of personal counseling because of that, because those students didn't have access to anyone else.
Hmm. All right. So, what inspired you to write Breathing Therapy? And, what conversation are you hoping it starts?
Well, it was a a long journey for me to finally clear out all of the all of the things that I had buried for in almost 40 years of life. And I learned a lot. I learned a lot about, connecting with others and not being afraid to ask for help and not being afraid to talk about what's going on in our heads. Um, so I came to a lot of understandings about that and a lot of understandings about living in gratitude instead of living in shame and resentment. And I wanted to pass those lessons along. So after I retired from counseling and I had the opportunity to spend more time really thinking about it, I um, I was actually writing a companion for people who go into therapy because the middle of the book, Braving Therapy, is kind of a chapter by chapter companion to help explain what's going on in therapy and how to make the best use of it, um, so that you can stick with it and come to resolution of the things that are going on. And what I have found after I published the book. So I also wrote in the last section of the book the benefits of sticking with therapy until you're actually well and what healing looks like. And having been living a healthier life these last many years, um, I don't have negative self-talk in my head anymore. I don't really, I don't bury things. Um, I realize that we all are struggling with a lot of issues and that we all have things to overcome, but they are also our opportunities for learning if we dive into it and stick with it. When I published the book and people were reviewing it, what I discovered was I did talk a lot about depression in the book, and a lot of people who have struggled with depression really resonated with my messages there about being able to talk with somebody and working on it and getting therapy, if that's the route that you need to go, and what life can look like when you're healthy. But um, I also think that there are a lot of lessons that people have learned in their lives, and it's helpful to talk about those things. I also did discover, after reading a number of reviews and talking to people, that a lot of people go to therapy for a short time, they start feeling better, and they stop therapy. And the
Mm.
reason that I called the book Braving Therapy is because the best thing you can do is stick with it until you have really gotten through the issues that you find yourself thinking about a lot, that you think that you should talk, maybe you should talk to somebody. And if you're thinking maybe you should talk with somebody, then you definitely should talk with somebody. And if you're in a therapy situation and the big hurts have been taken care of, but there's still a lot of little stuff that is you're ruminating on, you should stick with therapy. And that was the message.
Mm. All right, like you said, stick with therapy. And finally, I want you to talk to someone out there, specifically younger adults, right, who are trying to also just have it all figured out, right? So, what advice would you give to someone in their 20s trying to figure out life? I mean, many people in their 20s, they think asking for help is weakness, right? So, what would you say to them?
Um, I was when I was sitting in the therapist's office talking to him, it suddenly occurred to me that we're not supposed to do life alone. That's not how
Mm.
we're designed. We are social creatures and we are supposed to help each other. And I still have a problem asking for help because I still feel pretty self sufficient and I don't like to burden other people. But I have realized that there are times when I need help, and that it is, um, I'm honoring other people by giving them the opportunity to help me. And also, I've realized that when I do start to struggle um, with maybe feeling down, that when I'm upset about something or feeling my mood is low and it goes on for too long, that I need to reach out to somebody. And I still have a problem just saying it to people. And so I will send a text to somebody that I know is a good listener and tell them that I'm having a difficult time and really could just use a good conversation. And I have people in my life, I have friends in my life, longtime friends and family members that I can do that with, that I can have a good conversation. And a lot of times, just saying it in a text and putting it out there, getting it outside of my body and outside of my head, will start me to feeling better. And those good people will reach out to me to have a conversation, and I'll feel better. And I still have my therapist that if I get into feeling depressed and it goes on for too long, that I can go back and talk to him. So it is important to have those supports in your life, but when you're young, and especially if you are far away from people that you care about, it's a little more difficult to to find people that you can go talk to. So, there are mental health supports. There are online supports now in places that are not expensive, um, that you can look up to have somebody to talk to, because the biggest thing is to get it out of your body, get it out of your head, actually put it out in the universe, put it in a text, or get on a chat bot with somebody. Um, and I'm not recommending AI, because AI is not, you don't know what you're getting when you are talking to AI. So if you are using something that's online, make sure that it's a real person on the other end of the line, someone with a conscience, not someone that you don't know what kind of advice they're going to give you, which would be AI. That's
Mm.
artificial intelligence.
All right. I like that you mentioned AI because personally, I was gonna, just talk. I feel like, my generation, sometimes we ask AI because we feel like we can trust it more than people, right? So most of it's even a trend currently where people ask Chat GPT, they confide in the Chat GPT and ask personal questions because they feel like it is safer than talking to people, right? So I like that you spoke about that. It just shows that we need to talk to people with a conscience, like you said, people with human feeling, right? Someone who would really understand you as a human, right?
So,
So,
yeah, and so I would say too that, people will go to bars, or and talk to the bartender, or go to when you go to the hair salon or to get a haircut, and you talk to the hairdresser or the barber. um, a lot of times, you're just dumping what's going on in your life with other people,
mm,
but a lot of things that keep us quiet are that we're worried that somebody else is going to find out. And when you just go and talk with someone who works with the public, and you tell them what's
mm,
going on in your life, they're not bound by any kind of confidentiality. And they may,
mm,
a lot of times, they will use you as something to talk about when they have the next people coming in.
mm,
So that, if you're worried about sharing details in your life because you don't want other people to find out, then talking with a bartender or a barber or a hairdresser or anyone like that doesn't guarantee at all that they won't repeat that to other people. Where you can be sure of not having that stuff repeated is if you have a person in your life who will keep your confidences and not tell anybody else. That's great. A therapist is bound by confidentiality and can't tell other people. So when you go to a therapist, they can't even confirm that you go to them. They can't say anything about you. So that's very safe. And the online resources, not AI, because AI gets fed by all sorts of information. And if you don't know that AI hasn't been infiltrated by something that would give really bad advice, that would
mm,
tell you, well, there's no reason for you to keep living now. You don't know where AI gets its information, and AI can't judge the information. It doesn't have a conscience. So AI is not a good choice. Um, but there are online things like BetterHelp, is one. Him or hers has online mental health services, and there's one called Rula, RULA, um, that can help you. So, and also your local mental health association. So there are places that you can go just to inquire, and places that you can go and not really let them know who you are, um, but get a chance to talk to someone. So I strongly encourage, if there's something on your mind, reach out to one of those services.
mm. Wow. All right. So, yes, thank you, Linda. for helping us understand that actually. So yes, thank you for sharing your story and your wisdom with us today. And it brings me to the final segment of my podcast. I call it the rapid fire segment. You could either answer with a word or a phrase starting now. Would you
Okay.
prefer coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Hmm. What is one book everyone should read?
Stolen Focus by
Hmm.
Johann Hari.
Oh,
It's
okay.
about
So,
distractibility in this age.
hmm. Wow, okay. So, what is one habit that helps you live a healthier life?
What is one habit?
Yes, that helps you live a healthier life.
Um, Staying organized helps me. I'm not always
Hmm.
organized, but when I get disorganized, I'm not in good shape, and getting organized helps me again. It may start by writing things down, making a list.
Okay, right, like writing, making a
So
list.
making a
Okay.
list, writing things
Hmm.
down.
Hmm. Okay. All right. And finally, what is one word that describes this chapter of your life?
The chapter that I was talking about with therapy, or that my chapter now?
Your chapter now.
I think gratitude.
Hmm. Hmm. Wow. Okay, so yes, thank you, Linda, for like I said, sharing your story with us. Your journey reminds us that healing requires courage and that asking for help can be one of the strongest things we ever do. So thank you, Linda. And finally, before you go, where can listeners get to, learn more about you and also connect with you?
Um, I have a website. It's titled L Fig Knipe, and my book,
Mhm.
Braving Therapy, Rape, Buried Trauma, and the Triumphant Journey Over PTSD, is on Amazon, and it's by L Fig Knipe. So if you look that up on Amazon, you will also see how to spell the name, and my website is there. I'm on uh, Facebook and Instagram a little bit. I don't put too much on there though. But the book is on Amazon, and it's Braving Therapy.
Mm. All right. So yes, thank you, Linda. And I'm gonna put the link in the show notes so it's easily accessible for listeners. And to my listeners, I would say thanks for tuning in to Conversations with Sekani. If this episode sparked something in you, just as it did in me, make sure to share to someone who you think might need this, and also subscribe so you don't miss out on new episodes. Once again, thank you, Linda, and do have a wonderful day ahead of you.
Thank you.
All right, take care.